Just a quick warning that viewer discretion is advised. In early 2010, the Mexican drug cartel Los Zetas violently split from their parent Gulf cartel, kicking off a violent conflict between the two groups that left hundreds dead. The first set battle piece occurred in the border town of Reynosa, but the fires of war quickly spread to nearby Nuevo Laredo and Matamoros. In the midst of violence and panic, authorities and media initially attempted to downplay the situation, but it wasn't long before the Gulf cartel began to string up the bodies of the slain Zetas from light poles, and it wasn't so easy to sweep the gang wars under the rug. The Zetas hit back hard, and the Gulf cartel knew that if they wanted to end the war quickly and relatively bloodless, that they would have to launch a critical strike deep in the heart of the Zeta stronghold, San Fernando. Los Zetas were suddenly on the back foot, and losing the prized territory of San Fernando would be a huge blow to their fledgling operation. The municipality of San Fernando is a virtual spiderweb of dirt roads that connect with Monterrey, Nuevo Laredo, Reynosa, and Matamoros, making it a prized territory for drug traffickers. The Zetas were primarily low on manpower, and so drastic measures had to be taken to find new recruits. The first signs of the Zetas' new brutal recruitment tactic came to light in August of 2010. Mexican naval infantry made a horrifying discovery at the rural compound in the San Fernando area: the dead bodies of 72 migrant workers. 58 men and 14 women appear to have been straight up executed, and the reason behind such a slaughter was a complete mystery, up until an Ecuadorian survivor showed up at a nearby military checkpoint. He had faked his death in order to escape from what he described as a cartel training camp. Kidnapped individuals would be held to ransom, and once their families paid the money owed, the Zetas would simply deny their captives freedom and instead force them to join their ranks. Those who could not raise any ransom money or refused to join, they would be murdered in cold blood. The Zetas routinely targeted undocumented migrants since they had little recourse or ways to defend themselves. Authorities believed that such drastic, brutal actions would be short-lived, given their horrific nature in the ongoing cartel conflict, but as it turned out, the horror had only just begun. Throughout March of 2011, several public transportation buses were heading to Reynosa and were hijacked in the San Fernando area. Authorities found a few of the buses completely abandoned and burnt out in isolated spots in the surrounding countryside, but what happened to the passengers was a complete mystery for several weeks. At least until April 6th, when Mexican authorities found 59 bodies and 8 clandestine mass graves, with most being identified as the missing passengers. This discovery led to officials acknowledging that the Mexican drug cartels had begun to inflict fear through a new and terrifying method, stopping random buses and removing passengers, some never to be seen again. 2 weeks before the bodies were found, there were reports of buses being hijacked by the cartels near San Fernando, where cartel members would stop the bus, select passengers, take them hostage with the goal of being recruited. Bus lines were refusing to take people to San Fernando until the situation was resolved. Investigators began to mention that these people who were killed were not immigrants like the previous massacre of the 72 in 2010, but fellow Mexican citizens. Houston Chronicle journalist Dane Schuyler interviewed an alleged cartel member who explained Los Zetas had been using an ancient Roman gladiator blood sport to groom new assassins and to find new recruits for their organization. The kidnapped victims were forced to fight to the death of their prisoners. Men were given knives, hammers and machetes and were ordered at gunpoint to fight for their lives like a gladiator-style contest. The winners were ordered to go on missions and shoot at rival drug cartel members elsewhere, and the dead were buried in mass graves, with almost all of the corpses found in the mass grave had evidence of blunt force trauma. A cartel member on trial in Laredo, Texas, testified that the fighting contests between the kidnapped victims were ordered by Miguel Trevino Morales, a high-ranking Zeta lieutenant, and that they were used to make the killers lose their fear. The situation is so bad that Mexican Federal Highway 101, which extends from the border city of Montemoro to Ciudad Victoria, is known by the local residents as the Highway of Death. Those who travelled through this highway in 2010 and 2011 used to see burned vehicles, bullet-shot trucks on the side of the road, and dead bodies, often decapitated, that the cartels would leave behind. Others who have travelled through this highway and have survived carjackings and checkpoints the organised crime groups have installed from Padilla to San Fernando have reported what happens on the highway. A survivor saw 4 SUVs, all grey with tinted windows, adding that everyone was armed. Violence and consistent carjackings were so frequent that the bus lines avoided Highway 101 by driving miles out of their way. Another survivor stated that heavily armed men would stop buses at roadblocks and then force women and young girls at gunpoint out of their vehicles, strip them naked, violate them, and then drive away in trucks, leaving the passengers traumatized. One bus driver who said he had avoided being stopped this far claimed that another bus driver at the station had said that 12 people were pulled off the bus just 30 minutes before him. As of 2012, the US government issued travel warnings for going south of the border, and on June 17, 2011, federal police captured Edgar Montiel, a high-ranking boss in Las Zetas and the man responsible for killing 72 migrants in 2010. He confessed during interrogation that more than 600 bodies were buried in the clandestine mass graves near San Fernando, unconfirmed by Mexican authorities. The cartel operates in an environment where narcotics, money and brutal violence rule all, and unfortunately there's no shortage of people willing to use one to get the others. But what's particularly disturbing about the cartel is that they seem willing to use methods that we might normally associate with a major terrorist organization. The low value these men place on life is the most shocking thing of it all, but the power that attitude brings must be far intoxicating for some to refuse, and as the ranks of the cartel are swelled even by those who hate or fear them, I fear the cycle of violence is doomed to repeat itself over and over again until there are no more people left to kill. I am an 18-year-old male and this happened a year ago. So me and my family own an apartment in Mexico, but we live in Canada. We go to Mexico every year and now own a beautiful place on the water. We got good guards, etc., and it's an overall great place to live. I also want to point out that before I continue, that this story does not mean that Mexico is unsafe. Mexico is a mixture of Canada and the US. In a Canada way, where almost everyone is friendly, and in a US way, because it's not always safe by yourself. That being said, any place, anywhere, you should always be aware of your surroundings. Keep in mind that I'm a 6'4" male, and at the time I was 219 pounds. So it was around 8 o'clock at night, and me and my family, my uncle, my aunt, and my cousin, went to a restaurant that my dad's friend owns. After dinner, I wanted to go home and watch some Star Trek. I asked my dad if I could go, and he said it was alright, and bring the rest of our food. I quickly grabbed the baggie before walking out to the orange glow of the lampposts, which gleamed against my clothes. I was looking ahead when I decided to turn my head, and what I see sent shivers down my spine. A car was driving very steadily towards me. Its lights were bright blue and its windows were tinted, so dark it looked completely black. Feeling a dangerous aura, I slowly increased my pace, every step a little faster. I kept my cool, breathing slowly to help myself calm down. The car still followed, edging closer and closer. The urge to run overwhelmed me. And then I remember that the hotels here have security, and I decided it was time, and I bolted towards the nearest hotel where I knew it was safe. The car still kept following, but at the same pace. I stood in front of the gates, where there is a clear sight of me. The car wheels spun like crazy, and you could literally hear it hop over a small speed bump as it turned left onto a different street. I sighed, knowing that my quick decision may have just saved my life. My buddy told me this one just the other day. So his sister had 3 friends who went down to Mexico for a fun week of drinking and vacation fun. They were at a bar a night or so before they were supposed to leave, having a good time. And turns out the friend just up and disappeared. Her phone was unresponsive and she had completely vanished from the bar. Well, they were all shit-faced at the time, so the 2 friends just assumed that she'd gone back to the hotel or had ended up with some hot guy or something somewhere. Turns out she wasn't at the hotel. After a lot of commotion, they were driving back towards the US when they are elated to see their friends sitting in a car with a few Mexican gentlemen, a lane or so beside them. Strangely, all efforts to contact her are in vain. They were waving, screaming, and making any kind of commotion, but it all ended up with absolutely zero response from her. They alert the border patrol, that their friend who had been missing was spotted in a car along the highway. The Border Patrol stops the car and investigates. As it turns out, there was a pretty good reason why their friend wasn't acknowledging their presence. Because their friend was dead. But not only were they communicating with their friend's dead corpse, her organs had been completely removed from her body and she had been stuffed to the brim with drugs. Dead. Organs gone, stuffed with drugs. I was pretty fucked up after hearing that part to pry about what happened afterwards, but the image of her friends trying to communicate with their friend's dead body, their same friend that they'd just partied with the night before, chills me to the bone.